Welcome to our webinar, Making Your Maritime Digitalisation Ecosystem Roadmap from our sponsors, Smartship Hub. Our guest speakers today are Captain Pradip Chawla, Managing Director of QHSC and Training at Anglo-Eastern Ship Management, and Mr. Joy Basu, CEO at Smartship Hub. Here is our host, Carl Jeffrey from Digital Ship to explain more.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is how we develop the roadmap for our maritime digital technology. So that's about understanding what we want to get out of the technology and how we're going to get there. So we're going to set the context today. We've got a very special treat for you. We've got a short talk from Captain Pradip Chawla, who's the Managing Director, Group Quality, Health, Safety and Environment and Training with Anglo-Eastern Ship Management in Hong Kong. You can see Hong Kong behind him there. They've got over 600 vessels under full party management. That's about 300 bulk carriers, 200 tankers, and 100 container ships. So Captain Chawla is going to share his perspective as a customer of digitalisation. Unfortunately, Captain Chawla can't stay for the whole webinar or the Q&A session, but he's very kindly agreed to take questions by email afterwards if you have any. And then we're going to hear from Joy Basu, who's CEO of Smartship Hub based in Singapore. And Joy is going to explain how we should think about our digitalization projects in terms of a foundation which can last for decades as we're gradually building more data tools and improving our operations. So some of the topics he's going to cover are understanding what you want to build and your customer success factors, prioritizing the technology development, building a maturity model to help define whether you are in different areas, and finding ways to avoid the problem that many of us have seen where you have a lot of data but you're not getting a lot of value from it. So Smartship Hub defined themselves as a maritime digital platform provider that put technologies together to help you achieve your overall goals rather than just one specific technology. So for example, they've got platforms for condition and health monitoring of equipment, predictive diagnostics for remote fleet management, and it's delivered through customized cloud services and shipboard tools, which technology people might call the edge. So we're going to have a 10-15 minute talk from Captain Chawla and then a 15 to 20 minute talk from Joy, and then there should be plenty of time for Joy to take your questions. So I'd like to invite Captain Chawla to give his talk. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon which time zone you're in. It's good evening in Hong Kong. And as you can see from my background, I am pretty much not selling anything. I have no company logo, nothing behind me. It's real Hong Kong that you can see. And yes, Hong Kong is still open for visitors, though you may have to quarantine for 3 days before you come meet us. So I will get to the point quickly. I will share my screen now and talk about our perspective as a ship manager about what we see happening with digitalization and in the marine ecosystem. So here we go. I don't have too many slides, it's 25 or so, but quick ones. And as soon as I can figure out, yep, here we are. So everybody is talking about it. Digitalization has been a favorite buzzword in ship management, ship owning circles for the last, I would say, 3 years or so. I mean, nowadays you are an illiterate if you don't throw in the words artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, analytics. If this is not in the vocabulary, then, we need to go back to school according to the young people nowadays. So, but in reality, what does it really mean? What are people talking about in this digitalization world? I would say basically, if you take a ship, you take every equipment on board there, put some sensors on board and all of them, take them to a little computer somewhere on board, call it whatever, they always give complicated names to it. But imagine a little computer there, edge, and then you get that data across to through the lousy VSATs that we have on board with the bandwidth that we have on board, and you get it onto a cloud, which is another big computer somewhere sitting ashore, and you get all that data ashore and get someone to pay you a lot of money for it. And that's what, in a simple way, is digitalization of the world. So again, sensors, APIs for connecting up to data for different manufacturers, etc. And then it all kinds of goes into some kind of graphs, trend lines, etc. And then you actually find what are the insights dependent upon all that data. So the real secret about this is it's not about how much data that you collect, it's more about what you are going to do with it as a ship owner or a ship manager. If you are a software provider, then that's it. Your goal is to get paid for it, and you get the data for the ship owner, and whether he does or doesn't do anything with it is not your problem, kind of thing. So from a ship management view, for us, the challenge is more about who gives us the data in a format that is easy to understand and which has actionable items that can be distilled out of the data that we collect. So typical areas where these softwares are all becoming popular is optimization of the hull, propeller, and engine, all with the idea of saving fuel. And this requirement of spending as minimum amount of fuel has always been there. So digitalization kind of makes it more efficient. And of course, alternate to this, there is also an event happening that everybody in the world is now confused about what fuel to use on a ship, whether it's going to be methanol or whether it's going to be LNG or LPG, etc. But irrespective of which fuel is used, the need to try and save fuel relates to saving of money, and digitalization is helping in that effort to try and get the margins even finer in order to save fuel overall. The next big area for which is talk of the town all the time now is carbon emissions. We all know the reasons. We want to leave a green planet for our grandchildren to enjoy, hopefully without all the wars that we are looking at our lifetime. And so this is all about collecting data to try and meet the targets that we as a society have put upon ourselves to try and improve our greenhouse gas emissions. I'm sure most of you would know about the targets of IMO starting now and going all the way to 2050. And that digitalization is helping this in a big way. I mean, it will soon be that all this carbon emissions will have to be paid for. That is the new EU ETS package, as it is called, which is bringing about these things. And there will be discussions between charterers and owners about who's going to pay for all this. And these wonderful softwares and data collection helps us not only to know our greenhouse emissions to date, but they are also capable of predicting with a simulation tool, a basic calculator, to see what would we need to do in order to keep our greenhouse rating of the ship within an acceptable range. So these predictive tools are also very common now in all the softwares. The third part, of course, is machinery analytics. So imagine every temperature, every pressure gauge, everything that is happening on board is also available to you in the office in a dashboard of something like this, what you see on my screen. It would make all the engineers who are sitting in the offices pretty much excited. This is their latest toy. It keeps them busy very much in trying to be a chief engineer for 20 ships at a time. And it's improving the decision making between the ship and the shore, because we are all seeing the same truth, meaning that there is nothing lost in translation. Whatever is the pressure or the temperature of a particular thing, or vibration analysis measurement, or live cameras helping it, everything is available to the people ashore, which then makes it easier to work with the teams on board to try and get to optimize performance of the engines and hence save money for the watch. So it's also becoming common that all of us are having these kind of big rooms with lots of screens, and important looking people trying to figure out what the chief engineer and is having to deal with. These fleet operation centers are probably the top 10% of the companies in the world already have one, something like this. Third-party providers are coming out who are offering these services to people. I mean, this is our in-house one for which I put a photograph of it, but there will be many, many providers who will provide these kind of services for a big fee. The next area where it is not yet there, but which is coming in is intelligent routing. So based on analyzing the AIS traffic data, predicting what the ships are going to be doing, what's the best possible route between points, what's the best route to avoid getting into close quarter situations or too much of traffic. All of these things have become possible with the position of all ships in the world being available on your screen. This will lead to efficiencies also in the ships not coming all the way across the ocean at full speed and emitting more gases and then coming in and anchoring for fishing for the next 5 days. More and more ships will become part of a just-in-time arrival. So they will be steaming at slower speeds if required in order to not to come and wait outside a port, but to be able to utilize the berth capacity of a port efficiently and without having to keep ships idle outside the port. So glimpse of the future will be all about Internet of Ships. There will be, beyond this data collection that I just showed you, there will be things about in the field of robotics, automation, more and more, leading to fully autonomous ships in 30, 50, 70 years, I don't know, depends on whom you want to believe. The way one of the companies earlier was talking about it, Rolls-Royce, it seemed just around the corner, but now it again seems a little further away. So we are into the level of semi-autonomous ships today, possibly, but the regulatory framework needs to catch up. So augmented reality, another area, I'll got a couple of slides on that possibly later. And blockchain, not yet area of much of use at the moment in shipping, not too many products available. So yes, so this is the kind of stuff that navigators are already using, augmented reality with cameras and database feeding what kind of ship you are looking at, etc. And this is a screenshot of, I think, a company called Furono. And then there is augmented reality being used for fault finding assistance, for decision support system, and this all kind of leads to better efficiency in taking care of problems. There are, sorry, the screen on my left is not Furono, it's Orca, sorry. Okay, coming back to more of artificial intelligence, I think basically this is a field in infancy. Most of the industry is still collecting data. Connecting the dots between the data, I think, is still a little further away. Most of these algorithms that are being written today are still learning, and real expert advice coming out from these things, from the learnings, I think is maybe a couple of years away for mass scale usage. Robots, every day there is kind of a new company coming up with some kind of a robotic stuff for shipping. Hull cleaning, pretty common now. Hold inspections, yes. Firefighting, spares delivery, whole lot of drones and robotic vessels coming up. So an area to watch out. I think there's going to be an explosion of companies coming into this sector applicable to the marine industry. And then, of course, in the world of training, I think we are already using quite a lot of stuff in augmented reality and with simulators. So that's a field that will grow, I think, to 2 or 3 times its present size within the next 5 years. Learning is probably one of the biggest challenges, that the more changes we have, quicker changes we have, keeping the workforce kind of at the same pace as what the change of technology is happening is going to be challenging, and VR is going to be one of those things. So now the big question that generally comes up is that big data is here to stay, analytics are here to stay, artificial intelligence is here to stay. But does every company have a clear understanding or strategy for it? Or is it like too much of chatter, that kind of stuff that happens in social media about, a lot of talk without much happening in reality in actionable items? Businesses like actionable items. Okay. I'll basically skip this one to basically say that we are all heading towards quicker towards autonomous vessels, and how quickly it's going to happen, I don't know. Mass scale. There are enough number of Yara Birkeland and the Japanese ship and a few other ships which have already proven that the technology is available, tested, and working. How soon will it get adopted is part of this digital journey that we all talk about. But there can't be progress without some challenges. So I want to try and kind of give a perspective of what are the challenges that are faced, because when people come to sell technology, they obviously don't want to tell you what could be the difficulties that you're going to be facing. But once you buy the technology and you start using it, then you do understand what the problems are. So some of the problems: reliability of sensors. These sensors do not have maritime standards defined as yet in the regulatory framework. We are using sensors from other industries. The other industries don't have the whole factory, rising up 5 meters and banging down into the ocean. So sturdiness of these sensors is an issue. It's hot in the engine room, it's humid in the engine room, and there is a 6 directions motion on 6 axes that is happening to a ship. So all that pitching, yawing, pounding that the ship goes through creates problems for the sturdiness of the sensors. And we don't have agreed industry standards as yet. The second big challenge is data connectivity. Typically, a company would have something like a speed of 2 Mbps, 4 Mbps. It's kind of at a cost of $1,800 a month. And compare that with a home connection where all the technologies get proven in laboratories, where they have, speed of 4 gigabytes or something for $125 a month. And now you put this thing and then you say, oh, the VSAT is not transferring the data ashore because, right now it's going through the Norwegian fjords, and hence the antenna is not catching the VSAT satellites and, stuff like that. Or the antenna is mounted on the starboard side of the vessel and the funnel is now kind of interfering with the only satellite that seems to be working in that area, etc. So that's still a bit of a challenge. And the amount of data that will come out of all this digitalization is going to be tons and tons of gigabytes, which are going to be not yet so easy to do it, transfer them. And of course, we are all waiting for the Starlink and the OneWebs of the world to come and make it cheap and easy for us to transfer data. Then, of course, there is a question about the reliability of what algorithms we write, both from a technology point of view, whether they're reliable, and also from the acceptance point of view. Do you want to trust the human being giving you weather routing more, or do you want to trust the algorithm that is probably giving you better advice, but you don't, as a human being, are you willing to accept that would be better advice? Yes, there are some limitations to what the algorithm can do. A human being can kind of make connections between the weather patterns, the cargo that is on board, the stability of the ship at that time, knowing which part of the world you are in, how the weather systems may turn or go in which direction. The human brain makes a lot of these connections, which at the moment are not cannot be done fully by artificial intelligence routing, etc. Then comes the human challenge. What are the competencies that human beings need in order to try and get on top of all the technology? Very quickly, they will need to process large amounts of data. They would need to work with remote teams because the work is going to get distributed. More and more control centers are going to tell people on board what to do or what not to do. There will be too many alarms coming on all this machinery and equipment and automation and digital world, and the human being needs to cope with it. If you don't get any alarms for a long time, you tend to become complacent about it, and then one fine day when they all start to blare, being able to focus on the immediate steps can be challenging. And then there is this big elephant in the room: when will the regulators allow whatever technology is bringing? And typically, regulatory world kind of follows technology, not the other way around. And right now, the IMO and the MAS group, which is doing all these regulations, is moving very slowly. And that's possibly going to be a challenge, because if you see, the first driverless car drove in the US in 1985, and we still don't have them on the roads in every part of the world. So similarly, having all autonomous ships or digital world completely overtaking the present world may take a long time. So yes, the disruption for digitalization has started, but whether you are on board or not is up to you. And the world is going to have automation replacing skill. Algorithms will replace human insight. Sensors will replace human vigilance, so we don't need to watch the temperatures and pressures. And robots will either replace or assist humans. I don't mind if they replace me, as long as I can get somebody to pay for that house in Hawaii that I do want to have. And always do remember that technology will get adopted only if it saves money for the businesses, and people don't adopt technology for the sake of adopting technology. And I'm not talking of teenagers who want to buy Apple i14 model tomorrow. And if you haven't done it for your child, please, bookings are on, go do it. Otherwise, your child is not going to be happy for not having the latest iPhone. And with that, will it work? My answer to it is yes, of course, all this is going to happen. At what pace is up to us to decide how quickly we want to adopt it. Thank you very much. And I will stop sharing now.
Oh, that's fantastic. Do you have time for one question here coming on the board?
Yes.
Here,
why not? One or two questions, sir.
Oh, there's another one from Jonathan. Well, there's a question from Yoshio Otagaki, who's from a shipbuilder in Japan, and he's at Japan Marine United Corporation. He's asking, what's the minimum number of sensors to get proper insight of ship performance? I was thinking a laptop printer has about 100 sensors on it, so it's not about the number of sensors, more about the amount of understanding you want to get from a ship. But a lot of people say you can get good understanding from just a noonday report and fuel data, so you don't necessarily need to have thousands of sensors. I don't know if you have and maybe there's another question from Jonathan Earthy, who's from Lloyd's Register, who's just talking about the importance of good user interaction design. It's not just enough to throw data at people, but I think that's kind of implied in what you said. I think, but if you have any comments.
Agree. Yeah. Jonathan is a old friend of mine. We've met quite a few times. I remember him well. Yes, it is all about getting the right kind of insights. The dashboards and the UI UX is very, very important. The companies that will have more easy to understand dashboards will be the ones that will become more popular, provided they are the cheapest in the world also. But yes, the game is certainly about making it into actionable points rather than just throwing data at us.
Yeah, and on the minimum number of sensors to understand inside of ship performance, is there anything I mean, do you have any view on lots of sensors or small number of sensors?
Basically, everything that goes into an alarm monitoring system brings in about 450, 500 data points ashore. From whatever we have at the moment on our ships, I would say the maximum number of things on a particular Hyundai built ship would be somewhere around 700-800 sensors possibly that get tapped overall. But there's no limit to what can be tapped. It's what do you kind of be able to do with something that is usable quickly rather than trying to then go through, streams and streams of data to try and find what you need.
Yeah, and you dropped in a prediction of full autonomy. I think you said 40, 50 years at the beginning of the talk. I was probably, I've heard other people say the same thing. I think IMEX said this is a long way away.
There are autonomous ships working today. I've seen a couple of them in motion, but we're talking of general adoption for the entire disruption to happen. For that, we would need very detailed regulations and we need trust building. Nobody wants an LNG ship which is fully automated to be coming into port today. I mean, you would have protests all over the city, right? But yeah, slowly, starting with near coastal waters where you can reach the ship in an emergency, that will come in first. And then my prediction is that 200 miles outside the coast to 200 miles before the next coast, let's say between Europe and US. Regulators will allow that very quickly. And then they will say the human being needs to be in control, even though the human being may be, intoxicated for all we know, but he'll still be trusted more when it comes to arrival port and departure port. And in the middle of the ocean, the technology will take over. And that's proven already. There's no doubt about it that we can manage the technology.
Oh, there's a question from Keshav just come in. He's asking if you have any advice for seafarers and how to get skilled with new technology. It's pretty very difficult to give a short answer to that one, is it?
That's a very, very short answer. Learn, relearn, and again learn.
Okay.
You're going to be forced into the seafarer is going to be at the center of all this because the pace of change of technology has never been as fast in shipping as it is happening today. And I mean, it's like going from the paper chart to electronic charts, right? That kind of a revolution, which took basically about 20 years for us to get it through IMO and make it commonplace. And finally, UKHO is going to stop printing paper charts. But that kind of change is now going to happen every 5 years, kind of. New stuff is going to come. So yes, get your thinking hat out again.
Wow, well, thank you. I know you took time out of an important meeting to join us, so I better let you go. But thanks ever so much for sharing your thoughts. That's fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye. So I'd like to Joy Basu to come on. So as I mentioned, Joy Basu is from a Smartship Hub based in Singapore. So we're going to talk about how to develop the roadmap for maritime digital technology. So I'd like to invite Joy to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl, so much, and a good day to all of you. I'm aware that you're all spread across the world as you are participating in this. And thank you, Captain Pradip, for a very interesting session. It makes me...
Turn your camera on, Joy.
Just a second.
Oh, there we go.
Am I...
Yep, you're fine, yep.
Visible now?
Yep, video and camera.
Oh. Yeah.
Yes.
Carl?
Yes, you're fine.
Is it all okay?
It's all okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Oh, okay. Apologies, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Captain Pradip Chawla, for the wonderful presentation. Makes my job a little more tougher at this moment to actually keep up to that level of interest. However, next about 15 to 20 minutes, what I'm going to do is run you through the digitalization roadmap And Captain Chawla actually very nicely put up different areas under digitalization that maritime companies are considering. Some have already piloted, some are in production mode. So what I'm going to do here is share my screen and walk you through what we have done with our customers around the world. So here is a quick update on the number of connected devices worldwide that we are seeing that digitalization has brought in, and the kind of numbers we are going to see by 2030. Mind you, there is a lot of research that is going on at this moment to actually identify what part of these devices would be featuring from the global maritime fraternity, right? And in that, ports at this moment, they outnumber the vessels, but what we are seeing is vessels in terms of being connected vessels with smart sensors and IIoT platform. And I use the word IIoT and not just the IoT because of the sharp difference that it brings in the industrial IoT versus the regular IoT in that case. But what we are seeing is a huge number of devices that we see that is getting connected and continues to disrupt the existing business models. So here is a quick look at what popularly people would call various technologies under digitalization. But I must also say that while all of it looks good, like Captain Pradip was mentioning, how many of them would actually get into production grade is for us to wait and watch. And that is one of the themes for this particular presentation, that we don't actually take a really large hammer for a small nail. We would actually suit it and build it to purpose. So although we are talking quite a bit about AI, big data, cloud, blockchain, IoT, what we are seeing increasingly around the world, when I say increasingly, I would always say the larger adoption so far has been on big data, followed by cloud computing. There's a huge amount of push for cyber security. Of course, we see a lot of drones startups coming up, AR and VR startups coming up, but it is only happening in a phased manner, and that's exactly what we want to reflect upon in the next couple of slides as to what is the work for any typical maritime companies going to be, or ideally should be. So what we have seen in our experience in last 2 years is a lot of tools, solutions are available around the world. Many organizations have started using it. I would call them, they are like the early adopters and they are trying it out. Kudos to them. But there are risks associated in terms of the outcome. You might have thought of an outcome which you don't get in 6 months of implementation or a year of implementation, that probably you could go back to basics. That is where the fundamentals come in place. That is where the building blocks of digitalization come in place. So it's a very simple example, like Captain Pradip Chawla mentioned about lousy VSAT or FBB bandwidth available, which also means a lot of services that we would want to make it successful remotely probably are not possible, which also means these are the constraints that the industry is going through, which is not the constraint in airlines, automation or logistics or industrial automation, because bandwidth for them, for some reason, may not be as expensive or is a constraint. So that is where innovations are happening. Imagine a case where cybersecurity is a strategic part of the digital framework, but instead of having a strategy around it, we take up immediate implementation of antivirus, which sits on your onboard PC, sits on your shore PCs. Now, is antivirus equivalent to cyber secure operations? The answer is no. So this brings us back to the foundation, back to basics, and this is where a complete maritime ecosystem is what is in front of you. while a lot of organizations are playing or have adopted different sections to it, but what we are increasingly seeing is there is a common data layer from left to right of the screen as you go. So when you see port authorities, terminals, and vessels, and on the other side, you are seeing mooring operations and services or ship spare parts delivery kind of companies, and in between the entire value chain in the maritime ecosystem. So what is critical for a company which is going for digitalization is identify the points of data emergence. Where is it you are getting your data from? And when I say data, it's the most original data. Data coming from machinery, data coming from your processes, data coming from your transactions. And these all put together makes your first foundation, which if not addressed, then I can give you a couple of examples, probably one-on-one, where the digitalization initiatives actually fail, and it only leads in disillusioned aspect, and people always start doubting. So it's our duty as an organization, as consulting partners, to bring the entire framework in such a manner where the information flow, the intelligence points, the outcome statements, all are clearly defined, and the entities that plays critical role in this process needs to be known before. If you just see this particular slide, you're seeing we have put shipping company at the center. Why? Because we realized after the ports, which starting to get automated for about a decade, it's important that each of the shipping companies, and this includes owners, operators, charter parties, marine insurers, ship supplies agencies, all this category is under this particular section. And you see all the arrows either coming there or emanating from there. And that's exactly where we want to focus a little bit more on. The point where data emerges, is it the same point where intelligence also lies? Let's take a quick example. If your main engine, if your auxiliaries, DGs, or the flow meters are giving live data feeds, high frequency data feeds, do we have all the intelligence to do with vessel performance at that particular point? Probably no today. Probably yes for some of the ship owners or some of the vessels, but for most, no. So what we are also seeing is a lot of data that emerges from a particular point, the intelligence probably lies in the cloud. That also causes the vessel crew not having that particular intelligence at any point of time. So this is bringing the entire operations back into something called edge intelligence, which you would have seen in the beginning of the presentation of Captain Chawla as well, which means at the point of emergence of the data in and around that area, can I create enough intelligence for the people operating to take necessary decisions? And that is where business disruption is happening. That is where business workflows are changing. That is where value creation is constantly happening. And that is one of the outcomes that digitalization as a project, as a process, or as an initiative across the organization must aim for, the value creation, which is one of the key outcomes. So here is this slide, which is kind of a toolkit in some bits and shapes and pieces. It would be there with every company. But what would be important is, how do you fill this jigsaw puzzle with your own platform, with your own tools, which ends up helping you achieve the results that you want? Everybody is not at the maturity level of getting into condition monitoring, or for that matter, they are not at the maturity level of having ship-to-ship data sharing. And that's exactly what we are arriving at through this slides. I'm going to highlight and take maybe a couple of minutes more on this slide, because this is your digitalization framework. This kind of framework is normally used, you would see, by the consulting companies like the Deloitte or Anderson or Boston or Pricewaterhouse Coopers. So they would like to map the entire business before they would start suggesting or recommending or deciding about any particular tools. And we've tried our best. And when we work with organizations, we try to map the entire business, blow it up, take it bottom up, and make sure that at what level of the maturity cycle would certain tools, techniques, technologies would come in. So if you start from the foundation block, which is purely your technology layer, what is done by humans, if that data from the machine comes straight to you instead of someone taking a logbook and keying it in once a day or twice a day, instead I get every 10 seconds a day. So that is the kind of technology layer you are building below. Now, what is important here is the age of a company is not equivalent to the maturity of the organization in terms of technology. Yes, they would have business maturity. Would they be digitally mature, technically mature? Maybe, maybe not. And that is where the digital maturity model also comes in place. So we've tried to simplify it for this session in subsequent slides, but a little more on this slide is you start bottom up, you identify your IT and OT infrastructure, you move it up, and that is where we start identifying what kind of tools and solutions would be relevant for a business. It could be a 45 vessel fleet. It could be a 600 vessel fleet like Anglo, or 600 plus like Anglo is. And it could be a very large organization like Maersk would be. And that is where we start putting in each of those business cases. And each business case must result into the desired outcome that would have started even before digitalization was taken up. So there is nothing left to imagination, nothing left to guess. The entire team that is part of this transformation, we call it DX, like a popular term for digital transformation. People are completely in that process. There is a cultural change that is happening in the organization, in the way data flows, in the way information flows. The third layer that you see is the third level of maturity, where you have the platform, where you are getting your outcome statement defined, where you have been able to identify a lot of data points where you are tapping information from, and you are ingesting a whole lot of information to give intelligence to a variety of departments who are your end users. And finally, you have your topmost layer, which is the strategy. And more often than not, it is a senior management's decision, and it would always start with the strategy layer, because that is where they're defining the outcome. That is where they want to be socially known. That is what they want to be known for, great governance. And these are larger outcomes, which is broken down as you go down in this slide. Happy to take this separately one-on-one with anyone, but it was important for us to bring on how the digitalization framework for an organization should actually create your own development building block. You may want to ignore the details in this slide, but this is the kind of objectives that organizations would like to have. It may be little verbose or superfluous, but the kind of minute outcome that has been identified for each of the phases, right? Right from the business case to be written, leading on to actually making the financial model. We have seen in our own experience, a lot of organizations would like to start with 2 vessels out of the fleet of 110. And they would say, yes, we are going digitally active. I would often bring it out that if you are digitally smart, you will probably start with a pilot, but your strategy for the entire organizational transformation over a period of next 1 to 3 years must be ready. It's absolutely okay to start with 1 or 2 vessels, or you will have 2 vessels done with one partner, another 5 with another partner, another 3 with another partner. Now, this is where you will see how the conflict starts coming in, because that may not be in line with the entire outcome statement that you have put in place, or it may not give you the desired change management strategy that you have, right? We will see a little more of that in the subsequent slides. So here is whatever we have put here is primarily from different customer successes that we have had in maritime companies. And this is where we have quoted some of the areas for people in this webinar to also understand. So a robust digital transformation strategy and plan, I was just discussing a little while before. So when we work with these companies, we actually make the plan for all 110 vessels. It is not for the 2 vessels or 10. Of course, that's an execution plan, but we start with a complete set of it. We put the framework in place, and one of the objectives was cost savings. They wanted to bring in business agility, and they want to have efficiencies, and most important, the senior management wanted inorganic growth. We have seen in the last 2 years how the tanker market, how the container market, and the bulkers have been behaving. So often these are extraneous conditions. But once we have our foundation in place, probably some of these conditions can be leveraged to our advantage much faster and in a larger manner, right? So when you come back to a simple but comprehensive business case, like the point number 2, now this is where we actually broke it down for our clients for kind of a bite-sized, that's something that can be achieved in 6 months, something can be achieved in 3 months, something you can do it in next 3 quarters. So you would always see those kind of uptake and demonstrable. People can experience, people can show it, and it is very much visible. So whether to cut the plant maintenance system budget or to bring in some kind of vessel reliability by 15%, these are the outcome statements we actually defined before, not after the project started off. So the third point, come up to 15% cost saving, 30% higher uptime, the reliability section of the vessels. So there are different sets of people. People in tanker operators had a different expectations from a bulker, and the containers had altogether different expectations. So one solution, one platform, hit all probably is not right. And that is where the strategy helps to decide what kind of success would be an organizational success in this. So we have further simplified this for benefit of our audience today, that the focus is on the initiatives that have greatest impact, lowest amount of effort and money and time. So if you just see this up, so on the low impact, high impact on the right hand side, you have the high effort and low effort. So on the green zone, we ended up prioritizing because we had low effort and a high impact. Immediately getting the vessel, a smart vessel, and data being taken to the shore and using that data for intelligence, for your routing, for your condition monitoring, for decarbonization, all became very easy and very fast. So it naturally went on to be the most priority items. But often, if you are like, we were also seeing the remote egg dishes, or if you want to have very large sensors, vibration sensor being brought in, or if you want to have camera sensing and at an extremely high level of accuracy, these could be kind of bit expensive on your capex, and the returns might take a lot more time. So this is where it helps for the team that champions the cause of digitalization to spread it out, work with the consulting partner, work with the technology partner, and actually have step-by-step a routine for this entire project to head towards success. So this is a quick compendium of how the entire digitalization approach would look like. You have point 1, 2, 3, 4, below 5 and 6, and each of these points with the kind of efforts that will be required, which also goes on to show that unless the organization participates top down to various levels and cutting through the departments, you would probably have a smart vessel done by a superintendent or a fleet manager, which is not recognized, known, or value realized by the entire organization. And that's exactly where the success or failure of a project would come in. That is where the maturity levels would come in. So if you just have this slide where we are sharing the kind of a executive summary that we end up making for the organizations we start working with. This is in the lines of best practices. This is where you break down the key challenges or opportunities that the organization would have, and recommendation, and reason out the recommendation. A document like this gets read, implemented, understood across the levels in the organization. People would question it, people would ask it, and that is the opportunity we have to tell them what kind of tool to be embedded to give what kind of value, and how long will it take to reach there where you can derive value, right? So whether it is we are talking about decarbonization, the carbon footprint, like manufacturing industries, paint industries, if you just see the example, the amount of effluent that they would just throw away on a daily basis that goes into our water streams, or the poisonous gases that goes into the air, versus the measures they have taken to save carbon footprint, the difference is what that actually stands out loud and clear. And which is what, when we do for our own business, we know to that level of accuracy whether we are carbon positive or negative, and how much we are impacting in the entire business, right? Here's a quick look at the digital maturity model. So surprisingly, all the customers that we have worked with, when we gave this sheet to them, they all thought they are in level 2 or 3. Some of them even counted themselves in level 4. And that is exactly where, when we start working with them, hand in glove, team together, we have a complete set of work done, and then blow it up over here, that existing versus target state, what is where? After 6 months, where will it be? After 1 year, where will it be? These kind of dashboards, these kind of outcome statements are quantifiable. And that is exactly what would you need to quantify the outcome of a digitalization roadmap, and hence the emphasis on the framework. So we are taking a small case of why do we need so much of data? Of course, there's a lot of data because we are tapping machinery, we're tapping processes, we are reducing human effort in the entire process, we are trying to bring value to humans, although in short term, it may actually look to be more work on board or on shore, but eventually it is for good. Everybody knows that. We have seen all industries working on this, and the focus is on volume, velocity, and variety. So once your data starts coming in these 3 areas and categories, that is where you are required to build a very strong data strategy. That is where you must have your own analytics platform. Your third-party tools, Tableau, Power BI, IBM tools, may be good for a certain while, but you must have in-house presence, which is why organizations, the consulting ones also, help you grow this in-house, which works in absolute integration with third-party tools to give you the control on the data and the information and intelligence that comes out of it, right? So here is another thing, slide on what kind of companies who are using so much of data. All these examples are around us. We see it on a daily basis. Our focus primarily is only on the maritime. And this is where our objective is to increase visibility, ability to decide, and to save a lot of money for the stakeholders, and probably disrupt the business models in this entire process. Once you have decided to take up digital transformation, it is important that the same is also communicated. And this is where we help our customers also to find out what all channels of communication would you take before and inside the organization, and what all channels would you do it outside. The moment you've decided to go digital or digitally smart, you cannot exist in a silo, because this also gives you the opportunity to connect up. Let's take a simple example. Your machinery.
Just got 5 minutes left in the hour. I don't know if you want to finish off. See if we can see any questions.
Wrapping up in 5 minutes, Carl. Okay. Right. Oh, thank you. So your machinery condition giving a direct feed on to what kind of spares are required, giving feed to your stores and connecting up straight with the procurement channel. And finally, the vessel reaching at the port, and the part is already there. So this is where your internal and external communication channels work together. So here is a quick, we call it ESG, it's environmental and social and governance. This is a template, happy to share it out with people, anybody who may want it, but this helps in setting up the long-term perspective. And finally, here's the executive summary. Once you have kind of achieved a couple of milestones, your senior management would always want to have this, your board would want to have this, and people, shareholders, and everybody in the ecosystem would like to have that. So with this, I complete my session. Happy to try and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Well, that sounds great. We just have 3 minutes left now. There's a question again from Yoshio Otagaki from Japan, asking about what sensors you recommend. I mean, I think he's maybe thinking about decarbonisation sensors when you were thinking about the whole of maritime digitalisation. And then I had a question. So there's some difference between data and things that aren't data. So if data is numbers, so there's a lot which is numbers, but there's also a lot in shipping which isn't numbers. For example, if you're operating the ship itself, or you've got a list of tasks, or you've got knowing what's happening somewhere else. So do you see this as a sort of separate area, or do you see this as coming in together, or perhaps it's a 50% numbers, 50% not numbers? I don't know if you want to share any thoughts just for the last couple of minutes.
Yes, of course, I can attempt at that and probably take on one-on-one also. So it all depends upon the age of the vessel. If it is a new vessel, then we have seen no additional sensors may be required, because the existing control system is good enough to give you thousands of data parameters. For most of the vessels, we get about 3,000 plus, which are the newer ones, 2016 onwards. The older vessels can have as low as 100, 200 parameters, not enough for you to create and build a performance model, or to connect your ship to another ship, or have an entire ecosystem. So I would say for newer vessels, you can absolutely minimize to 4, 5, 6, 7 sensors only. And for older ones, these numbers could double up for us to get into the kind of ecosystem we are talking about and lead on to the connected vessel stage.
Oh, and any thoughts on how much of this is about data as in numbers, and how much of it is about other things, or is there an interesting differentiation, or maybe not?
Absolutely. So the number of data parameters is paramount, because that gives you a hold on what all can you do, where all can you connect, who all people will you get smarter together with. And it's just not your vessel to get smarter, your port that you're connecting up, your sourcing agencies, everything is in place, right?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, well, I think that's a whole new way of looking at digitalization. I think we should have more talks on this, because it's such a huge subject, and not enough thinking going into it, I think. And this is where the success criteria really is, I think. But we're coming up to the end of the hour now, so I guess we'll finish there. And thank you ever so much for an interesting talk. And I shall pass back to Farah for the closing words. Cheers.
Thank you, Carl, so much. Thank you, Farah.
Oh.